two of the Republican members of the Select Committee looking into the January 6th event at the Capitol. The topic, by the way, was discussed last night as President Biden held a town hall meeting in Cincinnati, Ohio, with CNN's Don Lemon.
I don't care if you think I'm Satan reincarnated. The fact is, you can't look at that television and say nothing happened on the 6th. You can't listen to people who say this was a peaceful march. No, I'm serious. Think about it. Think of the things being said.
We'll talk about it with one of those members of Congress who Nancy Pelosi rejected, Indiana Congressman Jim Banks, in just a moment. Also, the left is always talking about the science, except on those occasions, the science doesn't fit their agenda. We'll talk with Dr. Marty McCarthy, who is here to discuss the question of, do healthy children need a COVID shot? We're going to talk about that. And as we mentioned yesterday, the Republican majority in Louisiana and the legislature there failed to override Democratic Governor John Bel Edwards' his veto of the Fairness in Women's Supports Act and a constitutional concealed carry bill for law-abiding citizens. The chairman of the Louisiana Republican Party joins us to talk about that session. Also, the Associated Press gains access to one of the detention re-education camps in Western China where Uyghurs are being held. What did they discover, and what are Chinese officials up to by granting this access? We'll talk about it with Asian expert Gordon Chang. The website, TonyPerkins.com. I encourage you once again to download the Stand Firm app. That way you can stay in contact with us. We'll not only let you know when Washington Watch is coming on, but we'll give you action items when things need to happen both at the state and the national level. Again, the Stand Firm app. All right, Nancy Pelosi pushing forward with a select committee to investigate January the 6th. Not to, don't worry about the fact that the Senate already looked at it, but she is dead set on doing this. Well, the Republican leader, Kevin McCarthy, put forth names of Republicans who would be a part of this committee. Nancy Pelosi rejected two of those members who happen to be good friends, Jim Banks of Indiana and, of course, Jim Jordan of Ohio. The reasoning? Well, we're going to find out. Joining us now is Jim Banks, chairman of the Republican Study Committee, and as I mentioned, from the state of Indiana. Jim, thanks so much for joining us.
Hey, Tony, good to be with you.
So let's talk about why this occurred. What's going on here? What's happening?
Well, Nancy Pelosi proved what we said all along. Just to be blunt, we said at the beginning this was a political sham, a stunt by the Democrats to distract from everything going on in the country today. Democrats don't want to talk about rising crime waves around the country, inflation rampant and growing. They don't want to talk about the border crisis. They don't want to talk about the anti-Americanism and critical race theory that's being taught in our institutions and in our schools. They want to talk about Donald Trump. They hate Donald Trump, but they need Donald Trump. They want to talk about Donald Trump. They want to talk about January 6th. They want to drag Republicans through the mud, and they want to drag 75 million people in America who voted for Donald Trump through the mud. That's what they want to focus on. They don't want to focus on anything else. We said that before. That's why all but two of us voted to reject this select committee. But when Kevin McCarthy called me on last Friday, Tony, and asked me to take on the role of being the ranking member of this select committee, I told him I would do it because simply I believe that there are tough questions that need to be asked that nobody's asking, that Nancy Pelosi doesn't want to answer, about why the Capitol was vulnerable on January 6th to begin with, when we had intelligence 3 weeks before January 6th that told us something was going to happen on that day. And when Nancy Pelosi heard Jim Jordan and I start queuing up questions and immediately talking about how we were going to ask those tough questions, that's when she fired us.
To his credit, the Republican leader, Kevin McCarthy, did not bat an eye. It sounds like there's unity among Republicans that they're not going to let Nancy Pelosi call the shots for Republicans.
Yeah, Kevin McCarthy's a fighter. That's one thing I appreciate about him. And when Nancy Pelosi, the Speaker, called McCarthy yesterday morning and said, "I'm not accepting Jim Banks and Jim Jordan," McCarthy said, well, if you don't take those two, then we're not going to participate. We're not going to participate in a purely political sham process and legitimize it by sending Republicans if you're going to reject the names that I'm sending on our behalf. And I give Kevin McCarthy a lot of credit for taking that stance and making that very clear. That Pelosi's not going to, at this point, they're going to move forward. But I think she made a big mistake, Tony. I think by rejecting the Republican name, she's made very clear what we were saying all along. This was never supposed to be a serious effort to stop something like January 6th from ever happening again. This is all about pure partisan political process that distracts from the things that they don't want to talk about.
Now, Jim, I mentioned earlier that the Senate, a month and a half, almost maybe 2 months ago, had a bipartisan look into the January 6th event. So what does she think that she'll accomplish by doing something that's already been done in a bipartisan manner in the Senate?
Yeah, that's a really important point. I mean, the D.C. Metro Police Department has an investigation. The FBI has an investigation. The Senate has had an investigation. There have been other investigations, others that are ongoing. But the Senate, bipartisan Senate investigation, the report they came out with, it is a really important read that anyone should take a look at, because again, it implicates the leadership at the highest levels of the U.S. Capitol Police, a complete disintegration of leadership and security that happened on January 6th that allowed the Capitol to be vulnerable. And the big takeaway here, Tony, is this. Who is at the top of the food chain in the United States Capitol? It's the Speaker of the House. She's the most powerful person in the United States Capitol, and she is ultimately accountable for the leadership of the U.S. Capitol Police. And that's a big takeaway here. I know you have a background in law enforcement. You understand this very well. I met yesterday with the head of the U.S. Capitol Police Union, and he told me and some others, this was before I got the news that Pelosi was rejecting me to be a part of this committee. He told us that on January 6th, the rank-and-file members of the Capitol Police who he represents were not trained for what was going to happen on that day. They were not prepared for it. The intelligence that the Capitol Police was sitting on for 3 weeks, they weren't prepared for it to handle to act out on that intelligence, and they weren't equipped for it. They didn't have the best equipment available to tackle what was going to happen on January 6th, because those resources hadn't been provided to them. And they blamed the leadership of the Capitol Police at the time, who happened to report to the Speaker of the House. Why would we not want that to be a part of a serious investigation, a committee effort like this, to study what happened on January 6th to prevent it from happening again? That's a question that Speaker Pelosi has to ask. What is she so afraid of? Why are those tough questions not questions that we should be demanding answers to?
Jim Banks, I want to thank you for joining us. I know you got to run. I think this is more political theater, and I think it's going to be exposed. And I appreciate you joining. Appreciate all the work you do on the Republican Study Committee as well.
You got it. Thank you very much.